Football and hippies work together. Somebody write that down. Hey, welcome everybody. This is such a privilege and a kind of a dream come true for me personally. Been building this house for a while and always wanted to have really good art here. That's why we call this the first annual Art at the Dartt musical extravaganza. I want to do future series, all-day fests outside in the summer, and invite great acts as we have tonight. Further, it's a privilege and a real stroke of luck to have outreached our main performer just 2 weeks ago, maybe 3. It feels like whatever, a very short time ago, and I had seen a gap in his schedule. He's touring the Northeast and has about 20 dates. And I said, well, hey, Western Mass, and then you have 3 days to Northern Vermont. Hey, how'd you like to maybe do a house concert? And he was super gracious. I called him. Couldn't be a nicer guy. David Rovics is our main performer tonight. Opening, thank you, David. Thank you so much for, it really, I honestly couldn't think of a better way to kick off this dream of mine, so thank you. I play him I have a radio show at Royalton Community Radio, and I played him for a number of years, dozens of songs, and it's really meaningful to have him here, so thank you. Our opening act is another gentleman. He's more local, originally from Buffalo, New York, I believe, because he's always wearing Bills paraphernalia, and I have nothing against the Bills. A lot of sympathy for their showing in the '90s, especially. But in the last, 15 or 20 years, I don't know how long, I forget now how long he's been here. He's been in Rutland and a great music teacher in the West Rutland High School, and a lot of folks that I've gotten to know at Killington have talked about how great he is as a teacher. I know him as a folk artist, and I played him a lot over the years as well, because he's got a great folk sound, and he's won awards, a number of awards. One of the most recent of which that I can remember is the 7 Days Best Folk album a few years ago. So with that, I also want to mention I'm dedicating tonight's event to a friend who has passed. She was a young woman, 33, actually in Oregon, not long ago. And she was an incredible music lover, had actually gone out west in her camper in her Tacoma and toured around, and she liked a certain kind of music, a kind of gypsy music. Beats Antique was her band of choice. And I want to dedicate the event tonight to Rachel Smoldering, who passed just a few weeks ago. Without further mumbling than I am doing, I want to welcome this gentleman to the stage. He's a wonderful folk singer and a great teacher by all accounts, Phil Henry.
Good evening. Well, it is a great privilege of mine to be here, and what a joy to be in a room full of people who are here for socially conscious music and original music. I'm going to do a few songs right off the bat based on my love for Vermont, maybe the good and the bad and the ugly. This is called Green Mountain Blues. 7 north from Bennington, feeling low as I've ever been. 4-ball tires and now nor'easter snow. And still the last thing that you said is riding shotgun in my head. Wished I'd never started down that road. Come too far to turn back now. Gotta find a way somehow. Sometimes I feel like I was born to lose. Green Mountain Blues. Wiper blades are wearing thin. Can't see past the shape I'm in. Miles from the man I want to be. If I can make it home tonight, maybe I can make it right. Find a way back to you and me. Come too far to turn back now. Gotta find a way somehow. Sometimes I feel like I was born to lose. This life is lonesome, dark and deep, and I've got promises to keep. How long before I finally paid my dues? Green Mountain Blues. Green Mountain Blues. When Vermont goes green again, when our rambling sorrows end, we'll lay down underneath a maple tree. Forgotten be the Arctic air that once laid our branches bare. Only love and blue skies will we see. Come too far to turn back now. Gotta find a way somehow. Sometimes I feel like I was born to lose. This life is lonesome, dark and deep, and I got promises to keep. How long before I finally paid my dues? Green Mountain Blues. Green Mountain Blues. All right, well, second in my tour of Vermont takes us to Cavendish. Do we know the name Phineas Gage? All right, so some of us do. How many? We're mostly Vermonters here. Yeah, we know about Phineas Gage. All right, Phineas was a railroad worker in Cavendish in the late 1800s, and he was the foreman of his crew. He was from New Hampshire, but he was shouting to somebody on his crew, and there was an explosion beneath him, and a metal rod shot up through his cheek and clean out the top of his head. And the really shocking thing, because obviously the railroad was a dangerous place in those days to work, the really shocking thing is that Phineas lived and was waiting for the doctor outside of the hotel in Cavendish. As you might imagine, however, he was never quite the same. So the only other thing that you need to know about the song is that this is told from the point of view of Phineas's mother. My dear Phineas, I hope this letter finds you well. I had heard the worst. It goes to show you can never tell. My dear Phineas, when you left to work the line, you gave me your word you'd be back in 6 weeks' time. And now you're in a bed in Cavendish. I thank God you're alive, but you gave your poor mother such a fright. If you what you put me through. They say another inch or two to the right and you'd be dead. Only God knows how, but I need this now, like I need another hole in my head, another hole in my head. My dear Phineas, Dr. Harlow sends his word of your miracle, fit and strong despite the hurt. My dear Phineas, even he cannot explain, but he's warning me. The son I knew is not the same. You've been gnashing teeth and angry with words as sharp as steel. I'm begging you to come back home to heal. If you only knew what you put me through. They say another inch or two to the right and you'd be dead. Only God knows how, but I need this now, like I need another hole in my head, another hole in my head, another hole in my head. Now I read it in the Post today, the rather curious case of Phineas Gage. And as you roll your sideshow town to town, do you think this makes your mother proud? If you only knew what you put me through. They say that every mother lives her children's pain instead. Only God knows how, but I need this now, like I need another hole in my head, another hole in my head, another hole in my head, hole in my head. Thank you. It is so fun to have a venue where the dog comes up on stage with you. It's fantastic. And if if Robbie can make his way up at some point, that would be awesome too. I love that dog. So Bear and Robbie. So this is what a sweet venue that Jamie you've created for us here. This is pretty amazing. All right, one more Vermont song. This is the newest, even though it's takes place in 1785. This is something that I was not aware of until recently, is that Vermont has one recorded witch trial, if you can believe that. 100 years after, or more after the Salem witch trials, there was a trial in Pownell, Vermont, which is just north of Bennington, I believe. South. I went there, for God's sake. But the woman, Margaret Krieger, was tried as a witch for the sin of being able to run her husband's mill after he had passed. And she was given the choice between climbing a tree, which would then be cut down, or she would be thrown into the cold Hoosic River. And if she drowned, she was deemed innocent. So she was in the end pulled out at the last second, but the official crime was that she was an extraordinary woman. They call me Margaret Krieger, the widow. I stand here falsely accused for crimes of God's nature subverted. The truth is they don't care what the truth is. My husband, he ran this old mill on the Hoosic till one day late last summer he died. And I tried to keep the big wheel turning, but the townsfolk dragged me out to the ice. They call me a witch, they call me a crone, toss me into the river to sink like a stone. Two sides of the ice, now I'm down below. Two sides of the story, but I'll never know how far the righteous will go to drown an extraordinary woman in the cold. And it's not the weight of the wool or the water that pulls me down, 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 or the shock of the cold or the cruelty. I thought I knew my place in this town. I see the faces of neighbors and strangers, generations of grist for the mill. And they'll curse you or kill you, or worse, they'll save you. And still nothing changes. They'll call you a witch, they'll call you a crone, toss you into some river to sink like a stone. Two sides of the ice, now I'm down below. Two sides of the story, but I'll never know how far the righteous will go to drown an extraordinary woman in the cold. Two sides of the ice, now I'm down below. Two sides of the story, but I'll never know. Two sides of the ice, now I'm down below. Two sides of the story, but I'll never know. Now they raise me, shivering out of the water. They spare me, shamed and abused. Was it grace or their guilt that acquits me? The truth is I don't care what the truth is. All right, I'm going to get away from Vermont a little bit. Let's see. This one could take place just about anywhere. But I'm of a certain generation, and I play in certain places where there's a lot of gray hair, or I play for people who are much younger. So this takes place in a very narrow generation band because it mentions the use of cassette tapes. Cassette tapes are back, baby. It's been a long day, a long week. The year's a disaster and life's moving faster all the while. And all along you were brave and strong. You held it together, whether or not you thought so at the time. And now it's Friday, you're driving home. The highway seems endless and restless. You turn the radio on. Exhausted, defeated, you drop your defenses and you let in that simple love song. Oh, 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 listen to the sound of heartbeats and harmony and longing out loud, and a melody so bittersweet it takes you by surprise. Thank God for songs that still make you cry. Think back to that plastic boombox. You'd listen all Saturday for the DJ to play that new song. And quick press record, you gotta tape it. You hardly could wait to rewind it and sing right along. Oh, 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 listen to the sound of heartbeats and harmony and longing out loud, and a melody so bittersweet it takes you by surprise. Thank God for songs that still make you cry. Know the rules now, you're a grown-up. You pay off the mortgage, read the paper, go to work every day. Save a place in your heart for the art and the mystery of a song that can take you away. Oh, 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 listen to the sound of heartbeats and harmony, and longing out loud, and a melody so bittersweet it takes you by surprise. Thank God for songs that still make you cry. And this one gets you every time. Thank God for songs that still make you cry. Thank you so much. All right, well, I have time for one more. I want to say a huge thank you to David and Kamala for having me crash your party today, and Jamie, and especially Vincent, who's putting together sound for both for us here, but also for the throngs of YouTube denizens who are tuning in at home, who couldn't get their butts here apparently, but... I do have some CDs and some merch at the table over by the door. Even more importantly, I've got a mailing list there. I'd love to get your email address. I send something out every month or so, and it's my main way of kind of letting people know where I'm going to be. August sky, an angry mountain sleeps, where an ancient city died. An anxious village keeps its watch. We built this town on rock and ash, and on tourist cash we make our home. And we wonder how long a good thing can last. And if one day the world should wake and rain down fire on Pompeii, the gods would shake their heads and say, I told you so. I met a girl in Market Square. Her eyes are smoke and her hair is fire, and every smile's a dare to walk on a wire. On the ruins of a broken heart, we can start to heal, conceal the past. Still we wonder how long a good thing can last. And if one day the world should wake and rain down fire on Pompeii, the gods would shake their heads and say, I told you so. I told you so. And if one day the world should wake and rain down fire on Pompeii, the gods would shake their heads and say, I told you so. I told you so. I told you mess up the carpet.
I love that song. I have played that song on my radio show dozens of times. Absolutely love it. And the whole set. Thank you so much. Another round for Phil Henry. Also want to thank, of course, as Phil did, our sound engineer, the owner of the Underground, the force in music, the winner of the best recording studio in Vermont this year by 7 days in Burlington, Vincent Freeman in the back. And a wonderful human being, and I couldn't do this without him in any way, shape, or form. He also helped haul all that soapstone from Castleton with me 4 years ago. So he's got muscles too. So and also thank you everybody here. This is just such a treat and a privilege. Absolutely. Our next guest, I can't say enough. I don't know enough. I keep trying to learn more, but he's so prolific that I can't keep up. Nobody can keep up. He's been writing for, I don't know, since before anybody was was thinking about writing. It seems like he's got at least, he'll tell me later, we're going to do an interview after his set. He'll tell me exactly how many albums, but been writing for at least 30 years and putting albums out for at least 30 years. And mine's the field of themes from everyday inanities and fun. Has 2 children's albums out, but is mostly known for an incredible suite of songs that touch on global politics, history, American history, Irish history, Palestine, and a whole lot more. And I'm so happy to bring him here and to have him be the first opener here for Art at the Dartt. And with his partner Kamala, who has come all the way from Australia as well, David Rovics.
Good, we like that. Hello, huge online audience. I tried to tell people out there that this was happening earlier, so maybe 2 or 3 of them. Yeah, we'll do a song about you, too, coming up. And Phil, that was so wonderful. We'll start out in the 19th century and then we'll eventually get our way in this direction. Once upon a century, people lived above this glen. There were 50 houses here with parents and their children. But someone said they owned what those 4 generations had called their homes across the Scottish nation. Allotments kept on shrinking while the rent would only rise. One by one the broken crofters left the open skies, the frozen shores of Nova Scotia in a far-off colony, or somewhere else across the sea. Once upon a century, from the ways of old, from something like the golden rule to the rule of gold, it's just the logic of the market. Supply and demand says to drive the people from the land. Instead of eerie silence reverberating all around among the gardeners and shepherds, you would hear the sound of the pipes and drums and choirs of the songs that would be sung and the stories that were told in the Gaelic tongue. Once upon a century, you'd never think it could to turn into a field what had been a neighborhood. Once there were the promises of loyalty or clan, and then there was just profit if you can. If we travel back to a different time and space, it was possible for most to afford to live someplace, but it's the logic of the market, each investor's conviction. More money is just grounds for an eviction. Once upon a century, they cleared the highlands for the sheep. Most folks did not resist. As the rent became too steep, they packed their things and moved, scattered far and near. You'd never know that they once were here. Just for the whims of capital, the biggest profits for the banks. You fight a war for empire, and clearance is your thanks. From the crofts of Scotland to the sidewalks of LA, if anything has changed, who can say? Once upon a century, people lived above this glen. There were 50 houses here with parents and their children. Well, Vermont and this whole region was a big center of the abolitionist movement back in the day, and so was Wisconsin. Wisconsin became a state in 1848, and which was an auspicious year, and a lot of the settlers who moved to Wisconsin were radicals from Germany who had fled the revolutions of 1848, and when they tried to enforce and they were abolitionists, and very passionately. And so when the Fugitive Slave Act was passed in 1850, nobody tried to enforce it in Wisconsin until 1854. And then the one time they tried to enforce it did not go well for the enforcers. Gather round me, friends, I'll tell to you a tale about the day one young man was taken off to jail and shipped north up Lake Michigan for a trial to see if he should be sent back to live in slavery. A life of bondage was what Joshua had seen, but then he left Missouri and moved to Racine, where he worked in a sawmill by the lake shore in Wisconsin in 1854. When the word got round, outrage spread. The idea of sending people back to the bondage they had fled was one that could not be allowed to stand, although it was the law of the land. Passed by the Congress 4 years prior, guaranteed to start a prairie fire, which was what would be in store in Wisconsin in 1854. Thousands went to Haymarket Square, the most people who had ever gathered there. In Racine, where they decided they'd go see how that trial would go up in Milwaukee. And when they got there and looked around, saw the thousands more people on the ground who had come on horseback, ready for war in Wisconsin in 1854. The jail turned out to be no match at all for all of the people who'd answered the call. They laid siege to the place till they'd gotten their man, and then together the thousands they ran away from the cops, and then onward forth. The Underground Railroad brought him north, so Joshua Glover would be a slave nevermore in Wisconsin in 1854. No more attempts would ever be made since that Milwaukee prison raid to enforce this federal law after the rising that everyone saw. It was dead in the water, and that's a fact. The Fugitive Slave Act. When all the people said what they stood for in Wisconsin in 1854. Gather round me, friends, and I'll tell you a tale about the day one young man was taken off to jail and shipped north up Lake Michigan for a trial to see if he should be sent back to live in slavery. Well, they just started out with this new horrible application or a new feature of open AI called Sora, where you can do what they used to call deep fakes, which they now just call playing with technology, I guess. And so since that came out, I'm to the limited extent that I ever check social media feeds, I'm noticing that it is absolutely full of AI slop, and you have no idea what's real and what's not anymore. And so when I was seeing these videos of massive bulldozers ripping apart the White House, I thought, this has got to be AI slop. That can't be really happening. But apparently it's not AI slop. This is actually happening. And
more 2025.
2025.
Yep.
Yeah. 2025 keeps on 2025ing.
It does.
But 1814 was a good year for the construction industry in Washington, D.C. as well. And not only did they was the White House torched, but the Supreme Court and the Congress all on the same day. Robert Ross was from Ross Trevor. He was born in County Down. His family was given land there by the British crown. He was a man born of the gentry, born with wealth and fame, but he joined the British Army to serve his queen and make his name. In the Napoleonic Wars, he fought in many lands, in Holland and in Spain, in the far-off Egyptian sands. He was wounded there in battle, came back to fight another day, and he was sent off to attack the USA. York had been sacked and burned by invading Yankee men, but the Canadians regrouped, chased the Yankees home, and then the British Navy made its way to the shores of D.C. town, where General Ross burned the White House down. The year was 1814. The U.S. was in retreat. It was a Canadian victory, an American defeat. Without the French to help them, they got their ass whipped by the crown when General Ross burned the White House down. The place had just been constructed only 12 years before, but it had to be rebuilt soon after this disastrous war. The president turned tail and ran like a raggedy clown when General Ross burned the White House down. He was killed a few months later. Irish rebels stopped him in his tracks. He was buried in Nova Scotia in the town of Halifax. He might have been forgotten, but he'll forever be renowned. He's the man who burned the White House down. He's the man who burned the White House down. Do one for the dogs, although they've gotten very quiet. I don't know what they've been smoking. This is about a dog from Greece, but there's dogs like this everywhere if you look. He just became a media sensation because all the media was there covering the protests. Lots of folks are revolting. They've had enough of this shit. The rich are getting richer. They're saying that's it. But with Luke, it's different, that's clear. As he emerges from the fog, let's hear it for Luke Hanikos, the riot dog. It's a fight between people, but he is no pawn. He knows exactly which side he's on. In the machine of capital, he is is no cog. Let's hear it for Lucanicos, the riot dog. When a smoke bomb comes towards him, he kicks it back at the fuzz. He acts a bit different than a normal dog does. He's got a fan page on Facebook, but he's got no time for a blog. Let's hear it for Lucanicos, the riot dog. Let's hear it for Lucanicos, the riot dog. Well, for a long time now, I have been occasionally getting into arguments with supporters of the state of Israel, and I generally try to avoid those arguments, because they don't really usually accomplish much, whether on social media or somewhere else. But occasionally it happens, and then I get told things like, "You killed all your Indians. We're just doing the same thing. What's the problem?" Literally, I've been told that so many times by so many Israelis, and it's hard to know how to respond to that. But it is certainly true that there are incredibly deep parallels between what's going on in Gaza and what went on here. And one particularly compelling comparison is the 1862 uprising in Minnesota that they called the Sioux Uprising. He heard that they were on their way when the settlers came. Little Crow knew that nothing now would ever be the same. The treaties he agreed to, signed under duress, he watched as the land of the Indians was less and less and less. His people were left with a patch only 20 miles wide, a little bit of land by the Mississippi riverside, a little bit of land with a very uncertain fate once this place called Minnesota became a state. Little Crow went all the way to Washington, D.C., where he appealed his people's case to the highest authority. Then they took away half the land allotted for his kin, and then even that little patch saw more settlers moving in. Little Crow watched them hunting and logging all the trees. He watched his people growing hungry. He watched the children freeze when their meager crops failed. He went in search of aid from the Indian agents who had grown rich from the money that they made. What should have fed the people lined their pockets instead. Lincoln sent an investigator, and that's just what he said. The standard was corruption, treaties made to be broken, along with comforting words duplicitously spoken. Little Crow told his people, words bitter on his tongue. The agent had said his people could eat grass and their own dung. Peaceful coexistence could clearly last no more. He gathered up an army and set out to go to war. His warriors raided the stores of food that should have been theirs. They took guns and ammunition, put soldiers in their crosshairs. They won one battle after another, drove all the settlers out until divisions heading south were given a new route. Little Crow's uprising was finally suppressed, and the Indians of Minnesota were sent far off to the west. Whether part of the uprising, to the authorities it didn't matter, and they died of famine and disease. Little Crow was killed picking berries with his son, shot down by a settler out hunting with his shotgun. For handing in his scalp, the hunter made a dandy sum, and his bones were displayed in a museum. Little Crow was a leader, and it seems to me he made decisions when every option was impossibility. He had the choice to starve and die on what was left of the land, but he decided it was time to make a stand. He heard that they were on their way, and when the settlers came, Little Crow knew that nothing now would ever be the same. Yeah, maybe I'm a better anarchist. We'll jump jaggedly into the 21st century from the 19th century and skip the 20th entirely. And I wrote this song near the beginning of this century, and before Twitter existed, and which I vaguely remember, so many traumatic experiences ago. But apparently there were holier-than-thou, know-it-all, condescending leftists before social media existed, because I wrote this song about them. And I dedicate this to people in Montpelier. They know who they are. I don't drive a car because they run on gas, but if I did, it'd run on biomass. I ride a bike or sometimes a skateboard. So fuck off all you drivers and your yuppie hordes sitting all day in the traffic queues. I'm a better anarchist than you. I don't eat meat, I just live on moldy chives or the donuts that I found in last week's dumpster dives. Look at you people in that restaurant. I think you are so sad when you could have been eating bagels like the ones that I just had. I think it is a shame all the bourgeois things you do. I'm a better anarchist than you. I don't wear leather, and I like my clothes in black, and I made a really cool hammock from a moldy coffee sack. I like to hop on freight trains, I think that is so cool. It's so much funner doing this than being stuck in school. I can't believe you're wearing those brand new shiny shoes. I'm a better anarchist than you. I don't have sex, and there will be no sequel because heterosexual relationships are inherently unequal. I'll just keep on moshing to Anti-Flag and Crass until there are no differences in gender, race, or class. All you brainwashed breeders, you just haven't got a clue. I'm a better anarchist than you. I don't believe in leaders. I think consensus is the key. I don't believe in stupid notions like representative democracy. Whether or not it works, I know it is the case that only direct action can save the human race. So when I see you in your voting booth, then I know it's true. I'm a better anarchist than you. I am not a pacifist. I like throwing bricks, and when the cops have caught me and I've taken a few licks, I always feel lucky if I get a bloody nose, because I feel so militant and everybody knows. By the time the riot is all through, I'm a better anarchist than you. I'm a better anarchist than you. In Gaza, the Israeli army has not allowed anybody in other than occasionally doctors and nurses, but no journalists are allowed in. And then the Western media tends to have a bias that Palestinian journalists covering their own apocalypse are not trustworthy. So they tend to just ignore what's happening in comparison to the gravity of the situation, or in comparison to how much coverage this event has been getting on Al Jazeera or other non-Western outlets. But there's a reason they don't want the journalists in. There's a reason they've killed more than 200 journalists since October 2023, and that's because journalism is powerful and photographs are powerful. You don't want people seeing those emaciated children. There's a certain moment, if you're lucky enough, when you might so viscerally understand so hard how all of us are all members of the human family. Some people hear a song, others fall in love. Some people leave home and see the world. For me it was in an article I read, just a photo of a little girl. She was maybe 3 years old, with a mop of curly brown hair, despondent, standing on the ruins of her home, clutching a little teddy bear. Ain't it something how a heart can melt like that, just from a single picture frame? How an image can make sense of everything that matters, and you don't even need to know her name. Because we all know children just like her. We want to make them safe and hold them tight. And we can't imagine how someone could do this and create such a sight. She was maybe 3 years old, with a mop of curly brown hair, despondent, standing on the ruins of her home, clutching a little teddy bear. I might forget the details of whatever it was I read, but that photograph is seared in my mind. The photo of the girl, that was a photo of all the children, all of humankind. The greatest lessons that I ever could have learned didn't come from all the stories that were filed, nor from all the speeches or statistics, but from one photo of a broken little child. She was maybe 3 years old, with a mop of curly brown hair, despondent, standing on the ruins of her home, clutching a little teddy bear. There's a certain moment, if you're lucky enough, when you might so viscerally understand so hard how all of us are all members of the human family. It's dark times we're in, you know. Of course, you know that, but it's great that the Green Mountains are still green and not burning yet, and it's a beautiful world. The air is still fresh, the children have fun, the dogs play, it's all beautiful, but just depends on which direction you're looking, really. But in Gaza, it's a genocide. And that's happened before on this planet. Bunch of times. It's not unprecedented. The camp's open air, that's the one thing that distinguishes what is happening in Gaza right now compared to the time of the Third Reich and its crimes. Against any decency, against any sanity, against all the children, against all humanity. From Auschwitz to Gaza, there's no difference between babies and fighters on that side of the fence, the side where they starve because the food is kept out by the occupation and no others, no doubt, where people are dropping dead on their feet while searching for crumbs of food on the street. From Auschwitz to Gaza, all night and all day, all the people inside just wasting away. Everyone waiting for death to arrive, shot or starved or burned alive, where each passing moment is punctured by groans of 1 million children as thin as their bones. From Auschwitz to Gaza, the outside world knew, and many lamented about what they might do, while their leaders looked for money to be made in the arms trade. Once again, just like this, profiting from the apocalypse. From Auschwitz to Gaza, the stages of starvation are exactly the same under occupation. First the fat goes, then all the rest, the muscle, the marrow, the milk in the breasts of all nursing mothers, as in front of their eyes, their babies cry their last little cries. From Auschwitz to Gaza, under either command, all of the killing is entirely planned. Whether they call it a camp or a zone, it's all the same skin and bone. Whether they say work makes you free or humanitarian city. From Auschwitz to Gaza, the political line, from occupied Poland to Palestine, leaders outside will say we weren't aware of the extent of the horrors happening there. They'll shed a few tears and somberly then make a speech at the UN. From Auschwitz to Gaza, all over the place, the lies of the leaders who seek to save face, who say we would have acted if only we knew all that they claimed they really would do, and no one will believe at the time when some foolish person says never again. From Auschwitz to Gaza. At another time when the U.S. was killing millions of people in Southeast Asia, when I was a baby, 50-something years ago, in 1971, there was a guy who I'm now friends with, but who I did not know back then, who, with his friend Al and his friend Clyde, they had been engaging in lots of marches against the war in Vietnam, and they had been pouring blood on the draft cards and the draft board and burning the draft cards and doing all the things that a lot of people were doing back then. But they were increasingly dissatisfied with symbolic protest, and they decided that, well, they grew up in a military Navy town on the coast of Virginia, and when they one day decided what they actually should do if they wanted to really try to make a difference was join the Merchant Marine and hijack a ship full of bombs. So that's what they did. Gather round, I'll tell a story about a man I know, what he did across the ocean half a century ago. Death was raining from the skies all over Vietnam. Al and Clyde decided they had to try to stop the bombs. These two young men signed up to join the Merchant Marine, horrified by what they heard along with what they'd seen. They began to have discussions. They found a common goal. They joined the crew of the Columbia Eagle, and then they'd take control. The ship was full of napalm, heading across the sea to be loaded onto planes and be dropped upon the country to burn the skin off people beneath it. At the time, they vowed to break the law to prevent a greater crime. They thought they'd spend their lives in prison, or more likely they would die. But Clyde and Al agreed that at least they had to try to sail to Cambodia with all the napalm as well, where it might remain forever, the bombs that never fell. They carried out their plan And they didn't slip, just 2 guns between them, but soon they ran the ship. They brought it to neutral waters by seeing Nookville, that these bombs might never be sent to maim and kill. But that's not how it ended. The next thing that they knew, seeing Nook was overthrown, there was a military coup. Clyde McKay died in the jungle with so many of his peers. In a California prison, Al Gladkowski spent 8 years. The ship was not off course by much more than a bit. The future of the Folly, perhaps they didn't change it, but while the blood was flowing and most people spent their days maybe marching in the streets or just joining the rat race. There are those among us who can say they really tried, who did everything they possibly could to stop the fratricide. If you see a big white beard on the Central Eastern shore, he might be a mutineer who tried to stop the war. Gather round, I'll tell a story about a man I know, what he did across the ocean half a century ago. History is just full of stories like that, stories of people sacrificing their lives and liberty and livelihood to do the right thing, to act in solidarity with other people. So full of these stories. They don't make these stories into Hollywood movies, usually. You got to find out about them other ways. I found out about this one when I was in Scotland one day, some years ago, about what happened in Scotland when they had a coup in Chile. Chile is a long way from Scotland, but the 2 countries became very intimately related. Jet fighters bombed the palace. We all watched it on TV. The 11th of September, 1973. All across the world, people cried in vain as we heard stories of the students being tortured and slain. Stories of the workers, shop stewards, and the rest being slaughtered at the new dictator's behest. Labor groups condemned it, said we were on the workers' side, including all the engineers of East Kilbride. People organized a boycott of General Pinochet, who had overthrown Allende with a Hawker Hunter jet. Then a few months later, March of '74, Bob Fulton came to work at the Rolls-Royce factory floor. He looked at the orders that had come in that day and found crates with jet engines from Chile. Jet engines from the Air Force across the ocean wide, sent to be repaired in East Kilbride. It didn't take a minute for Fulton and his mates to come to the decision they would not touch these crates. Soon 4,000 Rolls-Royce workers voted they agreed to stand with the Chileans in their hour of need. Management decried them, the Tories screamed and cussed, but the Hawker Hunter engines were left to sit and rust. Nowhere else on earth were workers qualified to repair the engines sitting there in East Kilbride. It's often hard to know if you've changed anything a whit, but decades later a Chilean general would admit, for a time in Santiago there were no fighters in the sky, because the whole Chilean Air Force had not one jet that could fly. They may not have changed the world, this group of union engineers, but these crates of metal sat corroding for 4 years. So here's to British labor, how for 4 years it tried to do what could be done from East Kilbride. Jet fighters bombed the palace. We all watched it on TV. The 11th of September, 1973. I have a feeling I'm just raising it up and up and up, and we're probably up at like 448 or something, and I really need a tuner. I was noticing like other people are using tuners, and I said, these tuners are good. When I've toured with other instrumentalists, they have insisted I use a tuner, and they're right, you know. Except for the punk rocker, Attila, who was always, every time I tried to tune for more than 5 seconds, he'd say, "It sounds great." And I'm like, no, it sounds like shit. Just shut up and let me. Then Alistair would say, "Why do you put the capo on after you tune? Then you have to tune it again." I don't know why. I've never. We were invited to Mexico last March. I wrote this song 25 years ago, and when I wrote this song, I thought, if anything good happens as a result of writing this song, at least one possible thing that might happen is I get invited to sing at a festival in Mexico, and it finally happened 25 years later. You just have to wait sometimes. You just have to wait. Good things will happen to those who wait. You know, either that or you die, and then that might be good too, you know, it depends. Don't know. See what happens next. My name is John Riley. Have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. They're all sing-alongs if you figure out the chorus before it's over, you know. We marched neath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin gold bra, bright with the harp and the shamrock, and Libertad Padre Republica. Just 50 years after Wolfe Tone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may, but from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in 5 major battles. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside in the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. Well, I've been before I left Portland on October 6th, there was Trump seemed to be getting exactly what he was looking for by sending all the federal goons to Portland, which was rock throwing anarchists, which we have a lot of in Portland. And so they got their footage of people throwing rocks and assaulting a journalist and all the stuff they were looking for. But then came the frogs. And I'm just so happy to see the frogs, because I'm so tired of the rock throwers, because they're not actually doing anything useful. And much as dedicated as they are and willing to go to prison for throwing a rock, it's really a bad idea, I think. But I only figured that out in my old age, so I've obviously become conservative and sold out, but you should have asked me when I was 20 what I thought of rock throwing. Would have gotten a very different response. In Arizona, it's a felony offense punishable by up to 20 years in prison if found guilty by a jury, if you knowingly provide transportation or lodging to somebody who is in this country without papers. So far, nobody's gone to prison. It's always a hung jury when they try to prosecute people. No jury in the state of Arizona wants to put someone in prison for 20 years for giving somebody a meal or a place to spend the night, but technically they could. So it puts a bit of a damper on that sort of thing, but there's a group called No More Deaths that just keeps on giving water and food and transportation to people. If you go to Pima County in the Sonoran Desert Lands, you'll find the town of Ajo among the cactus stands. The only town you'll see, the only water too. When someone is thirsty, there's no question what you do. For well over a century, it was a normal thing to have an extra jug of water that you might bring. In the harsh Sonoran, Arizona summer heat, we'd rather give the vultures something else to eat. You didn't ask where I was going, nor where I'd been. I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was naked, you gave me clothes. I was a stranger. You let me in. I have this book here, a story I learned well. I always thought I understood the tale that it tells. It's spelled out. All of us are forced to choose between. All of us are forced to choose between Caesar and God. You didn't ask where I was going, nor where I'd been. I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was naked, you gave me clothes. I was a stranger. You let me in. You let me in. You let me in. And reenacting certain events from the early 1930s, just before or just around the time of the Nazis taking power. That's when I found out that my friend Katerina, who I was walking around with, had some very impressive grandparents.
her grandfather was a city councilor, communist city councilor when the Nazis took over, and her grandmother was also very active communist. Her name was Katerina Jakob, and same name as my friend.
Katerina Jakob, long before she took that name, was organizing workers in Hamburg just the same. Organizing beneath the flag of deepest red, a new dawn of peace and freedom clearly shining in her head. Katerina Jakob first was sent to jail when the trappings of democracy all began to fail. She was frequently arrested in and out of custody while her first husband was in hiding from the Nazis. Katerina Jakob was acquitted of a crime, but the Gestapo had the last word. They weren't finished with her this time. She was sent to Ravensbrück, a killing hunger at her side. She heard of the execution, how her second husband died. For Katerina Jakob, the end was close at hand. She was on a death march with a ragged, starving band, marching through a forest, being led by the SS. What would happen hours later seemed impossible to guess. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Katerina Jakob thought about her children and the friends and comrades taking care of them, not knowing yet if any of them survived, not knowing that soon she'd see her daughters both alive. Katerina Jakob watched the German soldiers fleeing, streaming from the east, that's what she was seeing. Allied bombers flew above them, she thought they all might die, and then soon there was the silence of all the SS men. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Katerina Jakob saw red flags flapping in the breeze above the Russian tanks, and she fell upon her knees. And so many different voices in so many different tongues sang the most beautiful song that could ever have been sung. In German, Lithuanian, in Polish and in Dutch, a myriad of melodies as never had been such. In Russian and in Yiddish, Italian and French, emerging from the forest beneath a trench. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Völker, die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. Völker, die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. Thank you very much, and thanks so much to Phil and to Jamie and to Vincent for putting this show on. So much appreciated.
David Rovics. Thank you. And this is Bear. Yeah, applause takes many different forms, and these dogs know. We have another dog up above, Robbie, that has also been applauding a whole lot. So thank you for Robbie as well. We're going to take like a 5-minute break, and then we're going to move a couple chairs up here and do a 20 or 30-minute interview. Please stay. Help yourself to all the things that we have here. And thank you so much for you being here. Thank you. If you want to, you can keep talking as well. Just do it at a low volume. It's fine. We're just going to do a kind of Q&A chat session because we can learn what motivations we all have, why we're all here, and why music matters, and why it matters so much to David, especially. Again, want to thank Vincent Freeman for being such an incredible sound engineer. I want to thank Phil Henry for being such an amazing opening act, and our live stream audience. And I want to thank all of you that are here in the middle of nowhere, right? My brother, when I moved here, he said, you live in the middle of nowhere. And he's from like Vermont, right? Southern Vermont, in the middle of nowhere. He thinks this is the middle of nowhere. So kind of is. But really appreciate you all braving your way. We talked about having a dog in each of our laps, but pretty sure it's not going to work out. David Rovics, I can't thank you enough. What an incredible set. What an incredible artist you are.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and making this all happen. I took a few questions from the audience. I don't know that I got them all. If there are any kicking around, they're on these little yellow slips of paper. So if you haven't found them, there's pens also. Write one down, bring it over to us. If there's anything from the live stream, also let us know. So I thought I'd start with a couple of the audience questions. Here's a quick one. What's your favorite acoustic guitar and why?
Gosh, that's a tough one because I mean it depends on like how long it's been played and whether like over time they sound so much better. So I guess I'm a big fan of Collings, which is I have a Collings but yeah, there's so many other beautiful instruments out there. Martin makes a lot of good, nice ones. I don't know.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I have the live stream audience can't see it, but I have a portrait by a great musician and artist, obviously, a painting of Willie Nelson, a multimedia thing up here. And of course, he talk about age and a guitar, right? Trigger, is that the name of his guitar? And he's got it like literally like every kind of glue and duct tape and whatever kind of keeps it together. How does that work?
I mean, if I've had guitars that get dropped like by the airlines, and then like they have damage and they need to get repaired, and then when a guitar gets repaired, that can sometimes really deaden the sound, and so I've had bad experiences with guitars getting damaged and not sounding good so much after that. But if they don't get damaged, they just get better over time if it's a nice guitar. So yeah, I've had guitars that I traveled a lot with, and they just got better over time, and then sometimes they get holes in them that they're not supposed to be there, and you have to like get another guitar, or try to fix the one that has the hole in it, but then it might not sound so good afterwards. So
Right.
yeah, they don't seem to last forever, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Somehow he is.
Mine
he's
don't.
made- yeah. Here is another question. Sorry. Are your stories provided by travel or a personal draw toward certain events or something else?
I get probably most of my stories from traveling and talking to people, and it's just a wonderful way to like see the world and do gig places where people know that you write songs about history, and so once that kind of gets out there, then people with interesting stories tend to come find me and tell me a story, and so that's definitely but also reading books and hearing listen to the news a lot and all sorts of different sources like that. Historians.
Right.
Yeah, the dog
So
has
it is
something to say.
informed by. It is informed. You said the first thing was travel. He's upset because this is his chair.
Yeah. I
keep
traveled with a
telling him there's
cat.
no
I was Robert Hoyt is a wonderful singer-songwriter from Georgia, later Indiana, and he had a paraplegic cat named Claude that he traveled with for many years throughout the life of that cat, which was like 9 years. and the cat sat in his passenger seat of his car. And somebody made a wonderful little documentary about him called Travels with Claude, about his travels with the cat. But when I was his bass player, I took Claude's seat, and Claude was very unhappy about that the whole time we were touring together, and let me know, like, with his claws. And I was frequently bleeding on that tour, but it was still a good time.
Yeah, he must have. Yeah, with just the.
He had huge arms, like, because he was paraplegic.
Right, right. He was
So his
dragging
front
his
legs
back.
were like absolutely like muscle bound.
Right, right.
When he got yours.
Have
Yeah,
you
really.
written a song yet about this? 'Cause,
No, I hadn't.
ooh, I was just saying, it's pretty rich.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think he's like trying to kick me out to hang with you. He's like, so, yeah, it's the opposite. So maybe it's Claude's revenge or something. I don't know. Yeah, so much there. Like thinking about the early days for you, I don't know much about you except I think I heard in another interview you had some classically trained parents maybe, or that was kind of the world you were in, right? What was is there, I should say, a catalyzing moment for you, music, or catalyzing moment in activism, or was it just kind of became part of you?
I mean, so I was raised by classical musicians, and my mother was always politically engaged in various ways, and so I was introduced to a lot of the kinds of things, the kinds of topics I'm singing about at an early age, from like the things that she was getting in the mail, and also because of her efforts, I was hooked up with like all sorts of interesting alternative kind of, like I went to Row Camp in Western Massachusetts, Row Junior High Camp, and that's where I first discovered protests against nuclear reactors, which Row used to have, and I discovered the musicians who came through there, like Al Giordano was one of them, and he would come through and visit and sing anti-war songs, anti-nuke songs, and that was my first taste of this whole thing. It wasn't like I was 12 and I decided this is what I was going to do, but that was definitely my first real taste of this whole thing and how powerful it could be and how galvanizing music could be for people and how it could be such a great tool for education as well as creating community and so many wonderful things that music can do.
In that one of the other interviews I heard you talk about just this, I'm always struggling to understand why music is so damn important to all of us, and I've said this before, like art, you can ask everybody, what are your 5 favorite poems? What are your 5 favorite paintings? What are your whatever? What are your 5? And they might not be able to necessarily answer all those, but you ask them, what are your 5 favorite songs? And they can't stop. It's like there's a where do I start kind of thing. What do you think is the reason that music in particular as an art touches us so much?
There was a study. Now it might have been like 10 years ago or something, or maybe more. I can't remember. Time does, but anyway, at some point in the past decade or two, there was a study of the impact of music and words sung and how they affect your brain, and they discovered something that musicians have always known, which is that they go straight to the emotional centers of the brain. That they get processed differently, and musicians have always known that. It's why it's so powerful to tell stories that rhyme and are sung, because they just they sink right in and they get right past all these little alarm bells that might otherwise go off if you're just talking about these things, and you don't need to use so many of those words that are going to bother people. If you're talking in a song, you can find ways to say things without using those words that are going to trigger people, like partisan types of words. You can avoid those in a song much more easily than in speech, I find. People know that around the world. It's such a powerful way to communicate. Social movements around the world have long known this. It's not necessarily something that in the English-speaking world is necessarily remembered by many people. I think we've been made to forget. But in most of the world, anybody will tell you who's involved with the social movement, you know, what's the beating heart of the movement? Well, they say music, of course. Duh. Like,
Right. And that unifying element of words, and you use the word partisan. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but words can be used in very insidious ways as cudgels, right?
yeah.
And we see that a whole lot. But you know, some of the you also mentioned Alger Dan, is that right? Or I'm sorry, there's an artist in Western Massachusetts that first sort of.
Oh, Al Giordano. Yeah, Al Giordano. Yeah, more known as a journalist, but back when I was 12 and he was 21, he was a singer-songwriter and anti-nuke activist.
Right. And I just happened to think of Nina Simone because she came from a classical background and went deep into the civil rights movement and jazz and really took some chances. Mississippi Goddamn and so many of her other songs as well. That kind of rides, I don't know, that kind of rides the line of being not only a cudgel but a wake-up call too, using language that is not partisan, that, you know, speaks to that beating heart thing. Who are your early influences besides that journalist you mentioned?
Oh, definitely Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie. You know, I discovered Bob Dylan somewhere along the way, and as a teenager, Buffy St. Marie, you know, all sorts of people, and then all sorts of people that most people have never heard of. When I moved to Seattle, I first heard Jim Page when I was like 19, and I was completely blown away. He's one of the best songwriters on the planet that most people have never heard of. And there's just so many others I discovered. I don't know, I guess 25 years ago, Rob Johnson, R-O-B-B, Rob Johnson from Brighton, England, another one of the most amazing songwriters on the planet that hardly anybody's ever heard of. But as far as like songs about history and songs about global events, I mean, these two are two of the best. And Christy Moore I discovered somewhere along the line. And one thing leads to another, and then there's just the whole, you know, it's a Pandora's box of good stuff.
Your first album was what year?
Well, it depends on whether we're talking about the first one that I'd actually want to admit to having recorded, or the, you know.
On the handheld in 5th grade.
I mean, I recorded a bunch of stuff prior to 1993 that I wouldn't want to necessarily be, you know, associated with, and I don't think there's any of those recordings anywhere outside of my mother's top drawer. But after 1993, I started writing songs that were good, and it was really, I mean, it was the experience that I had in 1993 that basically turned me into a decent songwriter. Was my best friend was shot to death when we went out one night in San Francisco, and and I was overwhelmed by grief for a long time, and the experience of that grief is kind of like doing ecstasy or like a whole lot of acid, or I don't know what from my previous before 1993. That's the closest I could come to kind of explaining the experience. But it was like with that much grief, I just didn't have the capacity to put myself in a box anymore. Like I always was able to somehow, my ego was always telling me like I'm a white middle class man from the suburbs of New York City, and that was an incredible drag on being able to relate to other people and to be able to communicate and to be able to write good songs, because I was always coming back to this idea that I'm this person and I can only write from some kind of weird, whatever that might be, some kind of white middle class radical male Connecticut perspective. I don't know but it just didn't work in terms of writing good songs, because I wasn't really, telling stories and relating to people. I was really telling people what I thought, which is a terrible way to try to communicate. Actually, if you tell people what your opinions are, then they don't really have the chance to form their own opinions. You got to tell stories and let people think for themselves if you want to communicate, I think. But that's what I figured out at that point, was like, and what made me be able to tell good stories at that point and learn how to do that was the realization that we're all humans, and that actually all these, like he was killed in the Mission District in San actually had a lot of Latinos living in it, not just running restaurants, but they actually lived there. And there was like overwhelming, they were refugees from El Salvador, Guatemala, and that was like, I knew that was the case, but I hadn't really noticed viscerally. And, you know, suddenly looking at everybody's faces, I saw that they had all lost people like I had, you know, and probably a lot more in most cases, and even more violent circumstances. And you could see it on their faces. And that's when I realized we're all human beings, and I can tell a story from any other human being and relate to what they've experienced, because I know that I can relate to them because I'm also human. And I didn't realize that until, you know, I had to experience enough grief to realize that. I don't necessarily think everybody else needs to experience it that way, but it's very helpful to sort of blow your ego out of your brain and actually relate to people in a real way instead of in your own little social constructed box.
Yeah, and getting out of your own ego, like you said,
Yeah.
that's key.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was for you.
Yeah.
Because maybe you were in that box, like you just described, of feeling like, you know, you said 1993, and I keep thinking of Wayne's World and the "I'm not worthy" thing, you know, and maybe some of that, like literally, maybe you didn't feel worthy enough to tell your own story, necessarily give advice or your opinion, until something like really punched you in the gut and said, "Wait a minute, this did affect me, and I'm a human, and I'm just right."
I mean, Dylan, his first, couple albums were amazing, and he wrote all these, told all these incredible stories from all kinds of different perspectives. And then later, he decided that, I think around 1966 or so, he said, you have to write about what you know, just write about what you know, which has nothing to do with what he was doing before that. When he wrote so much of his greatest stuff, he wasn't writing from what he knew. He wasn't writing from his perspective. He was writing from like the perspective of a woman in northern Michigan who works in a coal mine or something. I mean, he's never been a woman. He's never worked in a coal mine, but he wrote amazing songs from the perspective of a woman working in a coal mine. I mean, this is so and anybody can do that. You just have to stop thinking that you can't do that. Really, because we're all human beings and we can all relate to each other. This is just a fact. I don't consider it an opinion. It's just that's how it is. We're all humans, and we can relate to each other if we let ourselves, and if we stop thinking that because we are from whatever background that we can't relate to other people. But we're all told by identity politics these days more than ever before in human history, as far as I know, that if you're not from that specific, very particular background, you can't write from that perspective because you can't possibly understand that perspective, and that is just absolutely objective nonsense.
Yeah. There's a fiction, for fiction writers, a lot of kids are taught write what you know. Also, and I've always found that to be really lazy.
Yeah.
Because it hems you in, to a certain thing, and I think it discourages fiction writing or creative writing in general.
Massively.
Yeah. Right. I'm a better anarchist than you. You played that today. That was great. I always love hearing that song. It makes me think, 'cause you're from Portland, Oregon. I think of Portlandia and how it has a capacity for self-mockery. We can talk about where we lost that, but talk about that song a little, if you would.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think these days the circular firing squad is more of a problem than it's been any time in my lifetime, for sure. And I blame that on social media and the algorithms and the way it pushes up in disinformation and hostility and disagreements and pushes down any kind of reasonable discourse. But I wrote "I'm a Better Anarchist" before that, but even whether it's before social media or since social media, the most sort of good thing about that song is that most of its fans are young left-wingers who are very much coming out of that whole scene, but who are capable of seeing, the sort of ridiculousness of it and the excesses and the holier than thou aspects of it, and they're the ones who think the song is funny. So it gives me some hope for it's definitely really important to remember that if you see all this stuff on the internet or wherever, all this crazy talk, it's not representative of of most people of any generation, including young people today, most of whom think all that stuff is ridiculous. But you're not going to see those voices amplified on social media algorithms. You got to meet those people and realize, or just look at Spotify and look at my listeners, and you can see the best of all the songs. This is the one they're listening to the most,
Yeah, and it takes on, talk about, you have so many serious themes in your music, so many really important, trenchant, current event themes. What is, in your mind, the difference between, how do you reach people? I'm trying to form a question. Is it, are there different kinds of people that you can reach through humor versus really hard-hitting, I'm going to tell it to you straight kind of stuff? What's your experience with how you communicate through words to different people that way?
I mean, I think most people can relate to any kinds of these songs, and it really is mostly a matter of how you introduce them to different audiences, and also how you combine them, how you put together a set list. So, like, whether it's going to be more funny songs or more serious songs or different kind of, if you're telling a story that has a really heavy, depressing ending, or you're telling a story that has a more inspiring ending, it's really about mixing those things up in a way that forms a sort of a curve that doesn't leave people feeling too suicidal by the end of the evening. It's not that the songs, but as by themselves, work or don't work for different audiences. But definitely, 20 songs in a row. No audience wants to hear too much of any of that. They want to hear a more of a nice balance of different stuff.
Right. Yeah, I once heard Gillian Welch and David Rawlings sort of talking about their set list, and they're like, "We're going to start here with a somewhat depressing song, and we're just going to keep going down until it all peters out."
Yeah,
but
they didn't mean it.
But they didn't really mean it.
But that's the way.
Of course, they have, a balance too.
Yeah.
But
I tend to start out with stuff that's kind of like, nice, interesting stories that aren't too depressing, and then get into the really heavy stuff, and then like drag everybody out of that by the end. Hopefully,
leave them on a high note.
Leave them on a higher note at least.
One of the songs that I love to play on my radio show has been about the Ballad of the USS Liberty. You have a lot of songs about Israel, of course, now, and Palestine, of course. But the Ballad of the USS Liberty, I'm always so curious about. And recently, in the last 6 months, the president of the group that the veterans,
the survivors
of the USS Liberty came out and said, "Yeah, this all happened. Here's how it went down." How did you wrote that song a long time ago, though, right? Maybe talk to that song and what it's about.
Yeah, I wrote it only just like I guess around a year ago or something. And
I was thinking it was older.
Okay. No, and when did I first hear about the USS Liberty?
I've obviously played it way too much because I thought it was old.
Yeah, I can't remember when I first heard about it, but it was definitely during the course of the Israel's war on Gaza that I was writing. I've written a lot of songs about that, several dozen, and since October 23. But along with songs that are like specifically about different events that have taken place there, like different massacres that I've written songs about. I've also been writing more songs about the history of the whole conflict there, and I think the USS Liberty incident is definitely one of the most censored bits of history of this country that has ever been censored. I think a lot of people just don't even have a way to conceptualize or what happened. But briefly, what happened, for anybody that doesn't know, is during the war in 1967 between Israel and most of their neighbors. There was a NSA spy ship off the coast of the Gaza Strip that was monitoring the war, and then Israel, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of speculation about why, possibly that they were committing extrajudicial executions of Egyptian soldiers that the NSA ship was filming. And they, the Israeli military then attacked the ship, and despite the American flags on it, despite the crew all communicating in American accented English, telling them we're Americans, like, what are you doing? But for 4 hours, the Israeli military sent planes and ships. Waves and waves of them to drop 1-ton bombs on the ship, to rain napalm down on everybody, repeatedly strafing it with the machine gun fire, attacking any crew that tried to escape the ship and killing them. They killed 34 Americans and wounded, I think, 180. And they nearly sank the ship, which was what they were trying to do. But despite it being like a 20-year-old World War II era ship at the time, and totally not, state of the art by any means, and not very fast, and not very well armored, and it was a spy ship, not a war ship. And eventually, after some hours, and after the Soviet Navy offered to help them, they called off the attack, and then the ship limped into the bay, so. Eventually, people found out this had happened. They were told by President Johnson not to talk about it, and to not to talk about what happened, and a lot of them didn't, and eventually some of them did.
And there had been calls to the Secretary of Defense and even up to the White House, right? To, hey, this is going on.
Yeah, it got all the way up to the White House, and President Johnson said, basically, we don't want to make bad relations with Israel, and they didn't tell them to stop bombing the ship until 4 hours of the military attacks. And then there was there were American planes that were scrambled and sent over to the ship, and then sent back before they got there by Johnson himself, who told them to go back. Don't help them.
Yeah, it's a chapter that nobody knows about. I was so grateful to hear your song, and then I guess simultaneous. I thought it was older. I thought I'd been playing it for a long time, but just in the spring, this president of the Veterans Association for the USS Liberty came out with that story and broke his silence, which was great. There's so many songs that you have that talk about war, of course. I wrote down here, "Who Would Jesus Bomb?" That's just in the title. Combine both. That's like Shakespearean or something. It's both comic and tragic. But what a heavy song that is too.
It's so hard to imagine how Christians can justify imperialism, and but of course there's lots of them that do, like George W. Bush and Tony Blair and so many others. But the Bible is so full of all kinds of stuff about how you're not supposed to be, killing other people, and certainly not supposed to be bombing them. And it's full of all kinds of stuff about that not being the way that Jesus says you're supposed to do things. So it's hard to imagine. So I think the question, who would Jesus bomb? I was being sort of accosted by a man in a Whole Foods market in Houston. I had a picture of George W. Bush and the words "international terrorist" on it, and I had 5 of those T-shirts. I used to wear them all the time in like 2003, 2004. And this guy came up to me pointing at the picture of George Bush, and he's shaking, and he said, "He's a man of God, he's a man of God." And I said, "Oh, well, who would Jesus bomb?" And he just looked shocked and had no idea how to respond to that question. And I thought, oh, I should make a song with that chorus. That's clearly a good one.
Yeah, quick refutation of that kind of thinking. because it's just so, and it's so easily corruptible in the mind of so many people. I don't understand it either. Never have. I remember Conor Oberst back in those days from Bright Eyes, you know, went on Jay Leno with his cowboy hat and his boots and mocked George Bush, you know, terribly. It was beautiful. Beautiful moment. I forgot the name of the song, but I wanted to ask, you played it tonight. I've heard it a few times in the last few weeks about the 3-year-old. It's a new song, you know, and you said there's a million more, talking about a Gaza killing. What's the name of that song again?
Song for a Photograph.
Okay. And that, yeah, that's a really powerful song too. That I don't know, just I keep remembering a million more. And as the war and the genocide in Gaza keeps going on, we know these stories are repeating, and the numbers keep climbing. And you know, I'm hearing 300, 400,000 now maybe is what's being suggested by some official authorities. I don't know where. One of the albums, and David put out 3 albums in the last year. One of them was named Notes on a Holocaust.
Notes from a Holocaust.
Yeah, and that was, I was looking forward to that, and I couldn't get it because YouTube had censored it, right? Because of the word Holocaust, I guess, and then they put it in parentheses and from a bad thing.
No,
or something,
on Spotify,
right?
Spotify took it down, and I think because of the
Spotify,
title.
yeah.
And then when I put it back up again as notes from a parentheses bad thing, because obviously Holocaust was the word that got it taken down, it's stayed up ever since. So it seems to be okay to say notes from a bad thing, but you can't say notes from a Holocaust on Spotify. There's apparently only one Holocaust that you're allowed to refer to on Spotify.
Yeah, yeah. This has happened a lot in the last 5 years. Censorship.
Lots of it, yeah. I've
Whole
been
lot.
permanently demonetized from YouTube, and yeah, it's and definitely shadow banned on Bandcamp, and had my Facebook account severely disabled with no notification about it. But I can't use the invite feature on events. I'm prevented from using it, although they never said that was the case. It is the case though. So, yeah.
We might have a hungry dog who thinks electronics are tasty.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I
The
recommend-
wires, yum.
Yeah, that's probably not
Yeah,
probably
get a
probably
nice
not
shock
going to
from
be
that.
that edible. Yeah. How about a hand for Robbie? Yeah.
Robbie.
I heard in this other interview recently you did, and I'm amazed at the prolific nature of your canon. Like, 65 songs in 2 years since October 7th, and I was distracted vacuuming or something. I don't know. Who am I kidding? I don't clean. But like 65 songs since October 7th, and I started to hear you say, I kind of got the sense that you try to document this thing, or right?
As much
Is that-
as I
is that-
can.
Is that about right?
Yeah, just trying to, like, all the news that's fit to sing, as Phil Oakes said, you know. So, and of course, it's like way too much happening, far too many massacres, far too many, all kinds of developments to possibly even keep track of, let alone document. But at least I've documented 65 of them, and, you know, it's, yeah. And I would never do more than a few of those songs in a concert because it's just too much, you know, but they're all out there anyway.
How do you do it in your personal life, though? Like, how do you stay sane looking at this horror, and you keep going back for more? You know, I mean, or you're compelled, or, you know, I mean, I say that flippantly, but I don't mean to be flippant. It's a compulsion that a lot of people don't understand.
No, it's true, and a lot of people turn away from it, and I understand why they would, because they feel like they can't do anything about it, and just watching it just makes them feel like killing themselves or something, and it's just too much, and it is completely overwhelming, and the only thing that keeps me sane, one of the only things is writing about it. You know, as long as I can take this horrible stuff and turn it into songs and get, communicate with people that way and get it out there and then meet people at shows who are feeling the same way that I'm feeling about all this horrible stuff, and that's all. That kind of community is incredibly important, which is one of the many reasons I'm so glad the pandemic is over. But it's really it's so hard for so many people, and so many people are so overwhelmed by it. And if they're not watching Western news and they actually know what's happening, but it's really overwhelming for me, and I think everybody else who's not turned away from it. But yeah, if you're in somewhere where there's a lot of protesting going on and various kinds, and that can be a good thing for a lot of people to find community that way. Although, if the protests don't have music at them, then they're very depressing, and then they don't really help people feel any better. So and that's been a big problem for years now in this country, with protests not having any music anymore, because we've all been told that music is something associated with frivolous, drug-addled hippies, and we can't play music at protests because it's not serious or whatever. However, they've managed to convince themselves that it's a bad idea. It's something that hardly ever happens anymore at protests anywhere in this country. Live music, it's starting to change just in the past few weeks. It's starting to improve a little, but it's been a big problem for a long time, and it's not at all helpful.
That's a great point. I hadn't really thought about that much, and I haven't been to too many protests, but except locally, anti-war stuff. So I haven't been to any big ones in recent years. But Occupy Wall Street, were you there? Was there any music there?
Oh yeah, Occupy was very musical, but it's been like really in the past, like a few years after Occupy is when it became. It was really soon after. That was the last movement we had that was so musical. And I was singing at Occupy camps all over the country during Occupy, and they, the whole movement was all way into music. But things changed after that.
Yeah, and the situation's only gotten worse in our society.
Yeah, worse and worse. Like so because with identity politics dominating the left, anybody who's getting on a stage to sing music, well, they whatever they're singing about, they have to be from whatever group it is that they're singing about. So it makes it all very much more complicated. So like if you're singing about like U.S. imperialism in Mexico or something, you have to be Mexican to sing about that. You can't be somebody from the U.S. singing about that because you don't have the right identity. And then which is like, well, great if you can get Mexicans on the stage to sing about U.S. imperialism in Mexico, that's fantastic, and I'm not at all saying that that's a bad thing. It's just that what ends up happening is that once you have those kinds of requirements for everybody on the stage who's going to do anything has to be very specifically from some kind of group, what you end up effectively doing is getting rid of music on the stage, because you can't be so, you can't be so nitpicky about the free music you're trying to find for an all volunteer run demonstration. And it just doesn't work that way. You can't it's really hard to get a band to play at a demo because there's too much logistics involved. You have to pay them. You have to rent a truck. There has to be you have to be able to transport a drum set. It's far more complicated than just like a solo or a duo with one acoustic instrument, and then you're going to be tending white that way because of, and we can talk about that all night, but the whole history of the music industry, banjos are not a white instrument. Banjos are traditionally both, a very black tradition, but because of the music industry, which is a fundamentally racist phenomenon and has been since the beginning, they've convinced us, that bluegrass is a white thing and banjos is like a white instrument. It never used to be. It's just in our minds now. People don't even remember that it was most of the best black banjo players in the 19th century were black, and everybody knew that. And everybody learned, all the white banjo players learned from black banjo players in the beginning. And then we've all, forgotten this history, including most black people in the country have no idea. But, that's bluegrass, it doesn't need to be a white or a black thing. It can just be music for
Right.
everybody. You know, we don't need to be put into these boxes. It's the music industry that's been doing that for a century now. But you know, rock and roll bands are mostly white. Most of the rock singers in the 50s and 60s are white men, and specifically white men, not women, not black, but specifically white men. And that was the music industry. They required that. You had to be a white man to be a rock singer. If you were somebody else like Janis Joplin or Melissa Etheridge, you know, you were considered unusual, and they would talk about how novel this is. There's a white woman singing soul music, or there's a woman a rock singer. Wow, that's there's so few of them. I wonder why. You know, it's because they were not allowed to be in the bands.
Right,
you know.
right. So it's a top down. It's been a top down approach from
the beginning.
get-go.
Like
Right.
rhythm and blues is for black people. Rock and roll's for white people. The rhythm and blues bands can play in the black areas. The rock and roll bands can play anywhere. But you know, it's all been a very planned thing by a racist industry that has a very much political agenda. And there's been some good books about this too. Matt Callahan's book, The Trouble with Music, if you want to know more about the music industry and how messed up it's been from the very beginning.
Yeah, it sounds like in recent years we've seen greater and greater examples of divide and conquer, the striation of society and striation of people. You know, what you said, you know, I can't represent somebody else even if I have a similar experience because of whatever attributes I have.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very top-down approach, and gets into this idea of, you know, is a kind of a form of population control or you know keeping us. Music is the great unifier, right? We just said that. You just described it beautifully. And like, if it's the great unifier, and you aren't now allowed to sing about, you know, the experiences of a Latino man coming into America, they're breaking that unification down. They're creating further division.
And I think it's very intentional. If this whole idea wasn't come up with by the FBI, then you know whoever came up with it should have been working for the FBI. But I know it's a more complicated phenomenon than just any one thing. Like this was a plan, you know. But I think the people who have put out that message that you know you can't be this or that if you want to say this or that, and it all has to be regimented, and everybody has to be divided into their little identity silos that get more and more narrow over time. This is a perfect ideology for divide and conquer of a society, and if the FBI didn't come up with this particular brand of identity politics, then you know, somebody should have been working for the FBI. But if you look at the history of the FBI since their inception, their whole purpose as an organization, as we all learned in 1971 when the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI raided the FBI offices in Media, Pennsylvania, and liberated 1,000 secret documents and exposed COINTELPRO to the world. So then we learned that the FBI, from its inception, has always been all about dividing and conquering the American left. That's been its purpose from the beginning. First, it was the industrial workers of the world and the communists, and then it was the civil rights movement, and then it was the anti-war movement, the Black Power movement. They've always been involved with assassinating people and with spreading disinformation and rumor mongering and everything possible to divide and conquer the American left. That's been their purpose. So if you know, we know a lot less about what they've been doing since the raid on the offices in 1971, but we can be sure that they've been doing the same stuff since then that they were doing before that. And if, assuming that is the case, then of course they've been working since then to make sure that music is not part of any kind of activist scene in this country, because they all saw what happened in the 60s, which was that the movement was so musical and so powerful that it demilitarized the hearts and minds of millions of young Americans and other Americans, and became a serious problem for getting people to fight in Vietnam, which so many American soldiers were refusing to do. And a lot of that refusal is down to music. Not all of it by any means, but a lot of it is down to the music that was part of that whole scene. And we're talking about whether they were black or white or Latino, it was all over the whole scene, whether you're talking about music coming out of California or Michigan or wherever. There's a lot of very political music that shaped the narrative for millions of people in a way that the state was not able to do. and that was something that had to be stopped, or at least it couldn't be stopped, but it had to be. This can't happen again, you know.
It's really interesting, the history of music. Like in the 50s, it seems like it could be commercially successful because it was safe themes, and then as people grew awareness in the 60s, and these wars started to happen after JFK was assassinated, they wrote it for a while, right, for commercial profit, but at some point they decided, well, and then there's the whole theory about the Southern all the musicians that came out of the valley there as well, that may or may not have been, sons and daughters of some of the intelligence in America too.
I mean, that whole theory. I think it's more what we're. The idea that there's all these rock musicians, that famous rock musicians that are related to, important intelligence leaders and military leaders and stuff, it's all true, but it doesn't mean that they were put into that position because of that. This is a very militarized society. There's so many people working in the military and working in the CIA and all that kind of stuff, and the people that become rock stars are rarely from the bottom 80% of society. They're very frequently, if not the vast majority of them, are from the top quintile, just like anybody else that you ever have heard of. Anybody who gets famous, anybody who's a famous author, a famous musician, a famous playwright, famous conductor, the vast majority of them did not grow up in poverty. They went to private schools, and they grew up in households where, by modern standards, were making the equivalent of six-figure incomes or more, and they do not represent the majority of the American population, and it's reflected in who their parents are, who are often corporate leaders and business leaders and CEO or leaders in the military. That's just how it is when you're in the top quintile.
Right. It opens up into the whole labor versus capital thing, and you had mentioned a minute ago, I don't want to lose it, I just want to mention it now, that you see an upswing, and I'm thinking of Jesse Wells and some of these other folks, but I wanted to pause and ask and harmonize with you on some of these things, and how does she stay sane?
How do you stay sane? Have a seat.
I'll start with the how do I stay sane, might as well. Just because, I think it's a combination of music is really important and protest is really important. I think I'm lucky in Australia compared with how it is in the US, certainly as far as the solidarity movement with the Palestinian people. And this is something that is very present in the world, that there is a globally massive sustained movement in solidarity with the Palestinian people. We've been coming out and coming out and coming out again, and I think when we come out in big numbers, it makes a huge difference to how you feel. A lot of people have been coming out because it's the right thing to do, and we've had plenty of small or smallish protests, and a lot of kudos to people who stand on street corners and just do it because it's the right thing to do. Just over a month ago in my city, Maganjan, Brisbane, there were 50,000 of us and it was a national day of protest action. There were 300,000 people. It's a country of about 30 million, so that's actually quite a lot of the population was in the streets that weekend. And in Maganjan, Brisbane, that there were 50,000 people. I didn't have to say to myself afterwards, well, that was good to do. I'm glad I did that. It was like, whoa, this has been great. So that it does make a difference. We in Australia have yet to stop our government from allowing exports of weapons parts to Israel. And I saw that there were some people in Amsterdam in the last couple of days putting themselves on railway tracks and getting beaten up by the police, but trying to stop shipments. No, they weren't in Amsterdam, it was Rotterdam. They were trying to stop shipments of weapons parts to Israel. And I mean, I think we need to do that, because clearly just protesting hasn't been enough to stop the complicity of our governments. But it certainly creates hope when there's a lot of us, because that makes you realise, well, for one thing, you're not at home crying and feeling alone, you're with other people. And I think coming together in songs, I mean, I feel very privileged to be able to sing with David. I've known his music since the early 2000s or late 1990, probably 1999, I think. Or just anyway, I've been listening to his music, and my partner and I started organising gigs for David, and I've been very lucky to be able to work with and sing with him. But having been to a lot of his concerts as well, not singing with him, I can certainly say that events like this and all sorts of musical events where people can come together, or where we can come and eat together. I mean, there was a wonderful protest during Ramadan in 2024 in Maganjan, Brisbane, where we ate together. That was what we did. Like, there were some speakers, and then we ate together. So eating and drinking, dancing, if that works, song, it's a that does feel good, and it does help you stay sane. And when we cry together and feel angry together, that's collective, and I think it's good for us. So that's what I have to say about that.
I am curious with just media is you mentioned Western media. As long as you don't pay attention to Western media, something like that before, and I don't know if Australia is more restrictive or not.
It's the worst.
It's
the Australian
super
media is the
right?
worst of the Western world, I think, probably.
Right. And how does ours compare to?
Oh, it's hard to compare because it's so horrible here. But I mean, if you compare ABC and NPR, ABC is probably even a little worse. But yeah, it all sucks,
Yeah, it's there's so much infiltration inside of all Western media. I can't. They figured out a profit motive, though. I mean, Fox was the first on the right to really figure out how to make a lot of money directing people in one direction, and then it seems like lots of the other.
MSNBC must have been the second if Fox was the first.
Right.
I mean, it just we developed this liberal conservative media ecosystem, and then suddenly. Protests that never used to get any media attention at all, like for my entire life up until 2005, suddenly we're getting all kinds of media attention from both the liberal and conservative media, and that's what's been happening since then. That's why they all want to come to Portland, because for one reason or another, they all want to see, the tear gas and the rocks flying, and they all can pitch it however they want to, whereas, it would have been 20 years ago, nobody would have been paying attention to protests at an immigration office.
Right, but if they can use it to stoke division and keep people fighting, and we're seeing that more and more and more, it's so strange. If you question your own assumptions, if you question your own party, now you're blacklisted, right? And you've experienced that a whole lot.
Yeah, lots of. I've been. I am. There are actively groups trying to cancel all my gigs who are associated with Antifa, and there are groups that are trying to cancel all my gigs that are associated with Israel. So that's I got it coming from both directions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's insidious. I hate to overuse that word, but it is.
It is.
And there was a group last year that came together from both left and right. They couldn't quite embrace everybody. Brett Weinstein was one of the organizers. It was in D.C. I forget, but it certainly didn't get any of the play that this No King stuff got.
No,
right?
Nobody wanted to see that
people
kind of
coming
thing.
together.
Yeah.
God forbid, right?
No.
And there was a lot of folks they were starting to pull together, and to me, that's. I want to segue right into your songs, Tax the Rich and Deport the Billionaires, because I think that's a great place to start. I'm not saying this on the internet, am I? Anyway.
No, that's what we need, yeah.
Yeah, that Deport the Billionaires.
We not our neighbors, deport the billionaires. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
we
didn't do that one tonight.
Yeah, I kind of wanted that one. My God, what are segue to the new voices that might be coming up? This kid Jesse Wells, he's what? I don't know how old he is, 32 or something. Maybe not even 30. But
No, he's
got,
30 something, and he's brilliant. Yeah,
Right.
I love his music. Yeah.
He's almost as prolific as you.
He's more. I mean, I'm astounded at how fast he puts out songs. I'm humbled and astounded.
Are there others?
Yeah, there's a lot of others, and mostly they didn't get anything close to how famous he got. And I believe he is on a major record label, which and there may be some money involved with the fact that he gets 500,000 views within a few hours every time he puts out a song. But he is brilliant, and I don't want to detract from that. But I think it's also probably good for people to know that the people that get the most views are often getting help. It's but Carsey Blanton, she's fantastic. Probably about less than 1/10 as famous as Jesse Wells or less, but she's not on a major label. But she's wonderful, and there's a woman from England, Grace Petrie, is just this fantastic modern songwriter writing about all this kind of, what's going on in the world, different aspects of it. And there's lots of young folks and lots of older folks who are
I just
writing
heard
great stuff.
well, there's this Mary Cutter girl. She does a song called "The Devil Wore a Lab Coat," and then just last week I heard this woman Julie Lavery talking about response to "My Life as a Showgirl," the new Taylor Swift album, and she spoke to it at the beginning and said, basically, and whenever. I always want to do the Bernie impression, but at a time in our country, right, and I could do the Bernie, but I won't, but at a time in our world, right, when there's so much to talk about, and I have no shade on Taylor Swift. I don't know her music, and I have no opinion, but this artist was saying she's writing an album about her life as a showgirl with the biggest megaphone in the world of music over the last 20 years, and what's going on here?
I mean, it's just the music industry. There's if you look at the past couple of years of Israel committing genocide, and you look at the number of prominent artists who have said anything about it other than "I want the ceasefire," ceasefire now or whatever. But anybody who's actually written anything about it, you can count on a couple of hands. It's really
Where's Eddie Vedder right now?
I mean, where's I mean, I don't want to put people on the spot, but where's you name it? Where the
Roger
famous
Waters
where are
takes so much heat.
Oh, Roger Waters
takes
is amazing.
so much heat.
Why aren't
for
there more
his
artists? I mean, you can see with what the kind of problems he has, you can see why other artists don't want to go there. But it's I remember when to take an example of an artist who's not nearly like famous like Taylor Swift or something, but who had a good following in the folk scene. I don't know if people know Chuck Brodsky from North Carolina, brilliant songwriter. When after 9/11, when he and all the threats of invasion and the invasions, and he started speaking out against U.S. imperialism, by his own account, he lost half his audience. But he started out, not particularly political, and then got political. So he lost half his audience. It's not a problem I would have because I started out being political, but it's that's the kind of fear. And then of course they'd get dropped by the record labels. They'd get told that they're anti-Semites. They would stop. Look what happens to Kneecap. I mean, they got really famous, but they can't tour in a lot of places now because they're all being told that they're terrorist sympathizers and everything. So they don't want to see people massacring children.
Yeah. What is your advice to new artists or new songwriters in this environment?
I mean, things you could say as far as advice goes, but it's just it's a really difficult profession to go into it, whether you're going to be, if you're not going to, in all likelihood, you're never going to have a record label, no matter how good you are, and you're never going to get anything close to as famous like somebody like Taylor Swift. But if you want to have a career in the industry, whatever's left of the industry, the same rules apply now that applied decades ago, which is if you get political, your career is over. But, if you're not trying to get famous and be on one of the major record labels, and you just want to write songs about things that matter to you and sing them to your potential audience and make recordings and all that, you can do that. You don't need the record labels. But if you want to be really famous, don't write songs about Palestine.
Right.
It won't help your career.
There's one guy, this guy Oliver Anthony. I don't think that's his real name.
No, but he's also brilliant.
Yeah, he has flipped the bird to the record companies and said, no, I'm not doing it. And he somehow maintained an internet presence. I don't know exactly how.
Yeah, I mean, he has some very professional people working with him, and there's all kinds of professional production going on. That is not like with Oliver Anthony and with Jesse Wells. This is not one person standing there recording with his phone. That's just what they want it to look like, right. And they do that really well. And any famous artist always has a rags to riches story, or just a rags story, or about how they were writing all these songs in their brother's bedroom, and that they didn't have a studio, and all. That's the PR, and sometimes it might be true, and other times it's not. It's more like their father was a movie producer, and that's why they knew the right people to talk to make a good recording, and that's why they had the chance to become famous musicians in the first place. But I don't know. Oliver Anthony has rejected all the partisan stuff, and that's very impressive, because he could have become the Republican whatever. I mean,
right.
And he's gone for just doing his thing and rejecting all that. And I think it says a lot of good things about him.
And it might be a little bit safer than some of the material you take on, which is just, his material is important and absolutely, but it's maybe a little easier to just say Richmond, north of Richmond.
It's a little more vague, yeah. And it's also true of most of what Jesse Wells writes too. Although, he writes about specific stories, but when it comes to certain issues like war and peace, and a lot of it is a bit, stay in a safer, vaguer area.
Right, not necessarily taking a hard stance one way or another. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate.
Thank you so much.
All your time and your performance, and what's next?
We'll have Long Island on Sunday night and Amherst on Tuesday. Yeah.
Right on. And lots of trips to Boston.
And lots of trips to Boston in between.
Nice.
Visit my mama.
Yep. And hoping for the best for you there.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I can't thank you enough, and thank everybody here for sticking around, and the folks on the interwebs, as it were, and my dog, who's calmed down finally. So, to Vincent Freeman in the underground.
Thank you, Vincent.
Supports, and for all of us here, I'm Jamie Gage, and David Rovics. Thank you so much, and thank you to Phil Henry as well. Have a great night, everyone.